And make sure we are recording and we're good to go. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for what I have to share with you today. This is 3 ways to keep your yoga teaching alive in 2020. All right, we are recording, so if you get bumped off, don't worry about it. I'll send out the recording as soon as it's ready. Nice to meet you. I know some of you very well. Some of you are yoga teachers I've taught with for years and years at Yoga Works in Northern California and Southern California. Some of you are students and friends, and some of you I might just be meeting for the first time. So just in case, I pronounce my last name Danilchuk. There's a little phonetic on the right side there in case you need that. And to give you a little bit of context, I am an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist here in California, also an experienced registered yoga teacher here in the States. I'm an author, and I'm going to be giving away a couple copies of my books at the end for those of you who stick around. And I'm also the founder of the Center for Yoga and Trauma Recovery here in Oakland, California. I will say I'm so relieved, those of you also in California, that it's a clear air day and the fires are getting more contained. So it's just so nice to be in the office and not have to have my N95 mask on. So today we're going to cover a lot, and I'm hoping you get a little bit of inspiration out of this and some very tangible ideas for what you can do next to keep your yoga teaching and your career and your hope alive in this really challenging year. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what's up with 2020. We're going to talk about yoga and its transitions that it's going through right now in terms of online offerings, in terms of studios closing and other things. I'm going to offer 3 ways that you can support yourself and your students through this challenging year. All right. I always start, any of you who have taken a webinar with me before or a workshop, I always start by recommending you take care of yourself first and resource yourself first. So I don't know what kind of day you had. You might still be in your pajamas or half of your pajamas. You might have been working, 24-hour shifts. You might be in any kind of context, but we're not going to focus a ton on trauma like we do in a lot of workshops I offer, but even so, it's important to just take care of yourself. Use this workshop as a practice, right? Get comfortable. I always make sure I have my water. I got my little decaf oat milk latte from the morning still. So get comfortable, have what you need around you, ground yourself. And I know, I get it, like having a million tabs open. It's like the accomplishment of my life to only have, 3 windows open on my computer at the same time, which is true this morning at least. But I encourage you to focus in, like close out those other things, turn off your phone, just take the time to only have to do this once. The recording is available, obviously, but I encourage you just to tune in and practice that single pointed focus that we teach. And the guiding question here is always, what do you need right now? Maybe a little more support, a little more comfort, some water, figure out what that is, okay? So I'm not going to go all astrological on you. I'll leave that to the astrologers. But there's so much change this year, right? We've got a global pandemic. We've got social upheaval. We've got wildfires, huge lifestyle changes for a lot of folks, employment and career changes going on, right? There's high demand on healthcare workers, on emergency service and essential workers. That includes therapists. I know some of you in here are therapists as well. There's pretty high demand on us as well. There are also just many uncomfortable truths in the spotlight. And I'm speaking specifically here about racism in America and just the different isms or separations that are coming to light and judgments. And those are really hard and really tough emotional stuff for most people to deal with, right? Really looking at wounds, I think, in the States and other places. And even on an environmental scale, we're faced with the truth of the matter, which is not comfortable. So another reason to ask, right? What do you need right now? What are you feeling right now? And this is another gift yoga can give us, is just being aware of those truths, right? So with that, some of you might have been on a workshop I've offered a couple times in the last few months about safety and, is what we're going through trauma. I'm not going to reiterate all that this time, but you'll remember if you were on those, there's definitely a level of threat to our safety and our well-being. And threat, in clinical terms, it's death or threatened death is like one of the core components of what seems to cause trauma. So there's this sense of threat. Our systems are activated or maybe starting to sort of collapse and flag down, but there's a diminished sense of safety and security, and that's really difficult for us as human beings to deal with. Right now, luckily, we're adaptable and we're adaptive, but it's scary, right? It can bring up a lot of fear. So there are many threats to life. There's many layers of complexity. And I always also share there's like a continuum when it comes to talking about trauma, right? Somebody might be feeling the effects of the pandemic, the effects of the wildfires at a larger scale, like it's happening to the community, and someone might have a very personal loss of a loved one or a home. And those are different, I would say, on the continuum, right? They're a little bit different of a gradient of how much trauma are you going through. But I would say that what we are going through definitely activates our fear and protective responses, and asks us to adapt, right? So there's big changes, big feels. Not everyone in the States or around the world, not all cultures are trained to move through big emotions, to welcome them, to pace with them, to a lot of times we just sort of push emotions aside. So there's big change and there's big feels. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. Yoga itself is in a big place of transition right now. There's obviously online offerings now. We're looking at screens. There was a really fast switch around mid-March to, okay, we're not meeting in studios anymore. What are we going to do? Okay, let's get scrappy and put this online. We'll get a class going on Zoom, or we'll do YouTube Live, or whatever that is. And I know some of you in here are offering those things. Some of them are going well, some of them are really challenging. It does feel a little bit like there's a flood, right, in the market of online yoga classes everywhere. And we've lost that kind of special energy that gets cultivated when we're physically together. It's great that we have this, right? It's great that there's the option to teach online, but it's probably not necessarily, if you've been teaching yoga classes for any amount of time, what you had in mind when you were going in. So that's a huge transition. Now that the pandemic has been in effect for a long period of time, studios are starting to say, look, we can't afford this space anymore. We're going to move. Maybe there's some outdoor classes. Studios are closing, letting go of staff, furloughing, right? These are bigger career changes than just, oh, I'll just go online for a month or two, which I think is kind of what we thought in the beginning. So teachers in particular, and anyone who's worked in a studio who's being furloughed or doesn't have work, losing that sense of security. There's a lot of different layers of loss there. And I want to acknowledge that, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in a moment. The other thing that's super important about the transitions in yoga right now, like yoga is really going through a very similar purge of and a truth coming to light of seeing how across lineages, I can't think of one that this hasn't touched. There are, teachers that have been abusive, people who've been sexually harassed and abused in classes. And this is, I think, because of a lot of the larger social upheaval, this is like pain and truth coming to light. And it's hard, and there's a lot of big feelings in there, especially if you are someone who's experienced this, or you've been abused, or you found out your teacher was abusing someone. That's a lot to grapple with. But there's a huge opportunity here for us to actually create a more healthy dynamic in the classroom and even in the Zoom room, right? There are even more choices here, right? Like, oh, okay, well, where do we go from here? Tons of choices of how we can deal with this. And just to point out, some of you have heard me talk about complex trauma, like these things are all layered on top of each other. It's all happening at once. So it's not easy. If everything else were stable and there were just this one thing, like, oh, let's deal with what's happening with this lineage, or let's deal with just the online transition, it would be more manageable. But there's this stacking of stressors that's making it feel overwhelming and not so manageable. But I do want to make sure to point out, if you are someone who's a yoga teacher and you're like, oh, what is she talking about? What abuses have come to light? Like, look into your own lineage and see. I think it'll help you become a better teacher if you're really aware of these things that are happening or have happened. So let's look to our own practice and training. Like, if we just go back to basic, and I know asana is not the entirety of yoga, but many of you here are teaching asana pranayama classes. What would you teach about a transition, right? We're in this major upheaval. We're in this period of transition. What do you tell your students when they're working on a difficult transition, let's just say between two physical postures? You'd probably tell them to slow down, right? We've kind of got that one. That's the big message of the global pandemic. Everyone's been kind of forced to slow down. But it's been interesting for me to notice the sort of iterations of that slowing and the things that arise in that space, a little bit of a deeper knowing or more awareness of something that's not comfortable, right? More awareness of something that's not working really well or feels a little off. So first thing, if you find yourself, which is totally normal and natural, if you find yourself in emergency urgency mode, like, oh my God, I have to do something right now, can we use our yoga skills and take a breath and use our yoga skills to get centered and to pay attention and to connect within, right? That slowing down has so many other benefits as we move through a transition. So we're not just frenetic. Oh my God, I'll become a gardener. No, I'm gonna move to Wall Street. No, I'm gonna open a coffee shop. Like, if you find yourself in that space, love it, right? Self-compassion, of course. The activation and energy is trying to help. But can we also use the wisdom from this practice? Slow it down. Pay really close attention. And I'm going to highlight a few things you can pay attention to as we move through this presentation. And be intentional about your next step, right? It's so much more helpful for us as human beings when there's meaning behind something we're doing. Like, even offering this workshop, I saw so many of my yoga teacher friends posting that they're not going to be teaching anymore. They lost their online class with the studio. The studio is shutting down. Studios are in an unknown state, right? So can you have some meaning and connection and intention behind whatever that little next step is for you? And this is an amazing opportunity to notice what's not working, right? So notice unhelpful habits and work to gently, with repetition over time, just like we would in a practice, work to shift them. Make that part of the transition so that you're not just sort of hopping from one problem to another, or missing that the gold that's in there, right? It makes me think of wabi-sabi in Japanese art and ceramics, right? If there's a crack, they'll kind of fill it with gold. There's something artistic and beautiful to be found there, I really believe. So let's just pretend this is Twyla, your 2-3 vinyasa student on Wednesday at noon, and she's trying to learn how to go from warrior 1 to warrior 3. You're not going to be like, rush through it and ignore your body, obviously. You're going to be like, okay, let's slow down. Let's spin onto the ball of your back foot. Let's step in a little bit. Let's hinge from the hips. Let's look at, how square are your hips and what's activating, what's supporting this. You're going to move with stability, right? You're going to create some mobility and stability as you're supporting this person in a relatively simple, it's an advanced posture, but like a very tangible, I should say, process. And, if Twyla has a habit of, opening her hip, and you're like, okay, well, that's half moon, that's a different posture, you would sort of work with maybe stabilizing her outer hips more or something, for example, right? So we can apply those transition steps to where we are now. So I do want to say, in any transition, and especially what's happening now, there's loss. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't notice that and honor it. So yes, there's a loss of security. There's a loss of community, the people you used to see day to day, you know, the person who teaches before you and teaches after you. You see them in the locker room on the way in or out. You see the front desk people, you see your students. Like, that's a basic human need, to connect with people and to have community. So there's been a loss of that for a big chunk of time now. And there's a serious loss of structure and routine, and some of us do better with that than others, right? If you're familiar with like the Myers-Briggs test, the last, I'm an ENFP or J, depending on what country I live in, but that last letter is, do you need structure? How much do you need structure? How much do you thrive in structure, versus how much are you kind of go by feel? So if we really need that structure and then all of a sudden it's taken away beyond our control, that can be really upsetting and even dysregulating. So I did see some advice early in the pandemic of like, just make a routine and stick to your routine at home. And that might work for some people. I've known a lot of people where the opposite has been helpful. So that's kind of another conversation. But I want to make sure that I'm encouraging you as teachers in transition to take a moment and look back and go, oh, I really loved having that Sunday class. I really am going to miss seeing those students until I can see them again. And just look at what love was there, what you loved about it, what was working well, and honor, any sense of grief that comes up in that transition. Again, I think we do ourselves a disservice where we just skip really fast to the next thing and don't allow the experience to integrate internally, right? To process it emotionally. So give yourself that moment, right? Give yourself those times when you're feeling it to like feel it. They say feel it to heal it, right? Feel what that is and what that means. And then from there, right, look for the opportunity. And it's probably no surprise to any of you, it's often said, and to the best of my understanding, it's true, that the Chinese character for opportunity, for crisis, also means opportunity, right? There's change. Bottom line, there's change, and we can be involved in that change. So what's underneath all of these things that are happening? Let's look at, how has the comfort of what was normal before, how did that serve you? What was really good about it? Maybe you are a structured person and you want to do the same thing at 9 a.m. every day. Knowing that is super helpful as you take your next steps. But also look at maybe, how has it not served you? I know plenty of teachers here in the San Francisco Bay Area who taught at 6 studios that were like over an hour's drive apart without traffic, 2 hours drive apart with traffic, who were running around, teaching a few classes a day, just exhausted, right? And having to kind of scrap things together. So honor, oh, this was amazing about it. Honor, this wasn't amazing about it. This wasn't working. And then look at like, what's really most important to you. Are you an asana anatomy fanatic and you want to be in there and showing the skeleton and talking about the ischial tuberosities, and like, is that something that was really important to you about teaching yoga? Is it the community aspect of it? Do you just love being in groups of people? Do you miss one-on-ones? Is there something about yoga philosophy that resonates with you a lot? And a little bit in here is like, who do you want to be? What did you love? What wasn't working? And what's really most important about you as a yoga teacher, right? What's the most important thing in that for you? It might be healing, anatomy, community, something else altogether. And then from there, I encourage you to think, reflect, open up to, maybe free write or journal. What are the big, scary hopes and dreams that are alive inside you? So what are the things you've thought, wow, wouldn't it be really cool if I could do this, or I could do that? I could open up a healing center, or wouldn't it be really cool if I just taught in one place, right? I didn't have to drive all around the San Francisco Bay. Or wouldn't it be really cool if, fill in the blank, right? Whatever's coming from you. I found it to be true, and I love this picture. I hope, I don't know, I'm sure it's staged. Like animal rights, I hope the goldfish is okay. Such a bleeding heart. So, and it's a good thing. So if you want to grow into something new, there's usually that like, I'll just call it that oh shit moment, that like, is this really gonna work? I don't know. Can I do this? I'm scared. Often what we're afraid of also kind of tells us what's important to us. Like, oh, I'm really afraid this won't work. If you didn't care about it, you wouldn't be afraid it wouldn't work, right? So if we're looking for opportunity, you can use that kind of fear as like a little sensor. Ooh, I'm really afraid that if I opened a healing center, no one would show up. Well, I gotta tell you, there's a lot of people who are looking for support and healing right now. But aside from that, that tells you there's something there within you, right? There's some kind of care or desire. It matters. So all that to set us up for the 3 things, right? This is what you came to the webinar for, this workshop. 3 ways to support yourself and your students through this challenging year. The first thing is really not going to surprise you if you know me at all. I highly, highly encourage you to teach to healing stress and trauma, to recovering and moving through stress and trauma. What does that mean? Please read any of the free articles if you haven't already. I've written about trauma-informed yoga. I'm going to give you a lowdown right now. Create safety for yourself. Like I said, there's this lack of feelings of safety across the world right now. So what can you do to create safe space? What does that mean to you? What does that look like? What makes you feel safe? And then once you have that, what makes your students feel safe? It might be, as they say in Thailand, same, but different. It might be similar, but they might have some more specifics that you can find out. Teach to resources. So even though, yes, there's all this loss and grief and pain, like it's there. Obviously, we don't want to be super avoidant and just skip to the next thing. It's important to acknowledge it, but it's also important to speak to how do we get through this? What are our anchors? What can we lean on? What are truths within us that we can find, right? So teach to resources. It's going to make you feel better in your classes. It's going to make your students feel better and more resourced as well. And I could go on forever about what resources are, but I won't right now for the sake of time. Teach coping skills, pretty similar, right? So specific skills in how you're thinking, in how you're acting, in the choices that you're making. So again, this is going to remind you as you're teaching, plenty of times we're speaking to hear ourselves, right? Like research is me search, they used to say when I was researching at UCLA. Research is me search. Teaching is something that we're also reminding ourselves. So teach those coping skills, those little bridges from overwhelm into small action or into attention or awareness. I say forget the fancy, like focus on the basics right now. Most of us are pretty well challenged across the board. So as much as human beings need challenge to grow, I don't think we need like, say you wanted to start an online training. You're like, I'm going to do a 32 module online training on creative sequencing in yoga. Like that's probably going to overwhelm people right now. I just got an email this week from someone who is doing speaking and voice coaching. I have a friend who's in that industry. You might have actually met her through another workshop, Molly. And this person was teaching and they're like, we're going to give you 1,600 hours of content for this download. And I was like, whoa, as much as I just wanted what you had to offer, you lost me right there. Like that is way too fancy. Tell me 3 things. Tell me 1 thing. Like, come on. So I would say for now, doesn't mean don't be creative, but the like super complicated, elaborate, let's really challenge, it risks overwhelming folks. It does give us something to focus on, but the focus is maybe in lower reserves these days, right? So I would say build on basics, back to basic, forget the fancy stuff. Focus on connection because we all need that so bad. I want to hug you right now. You might not want to hug. You probably don't want to hug right now because we're all trained to be like, don't touch me. But like, focus on that connection and relationship. So if you're teaching online classes, if you can have a little hello, goodbye period, if you can have people unmute themselves, if you can have like an office hour or a chat or an outdoor yoga experience where people can actually see each other in 3D, right? Focus on that inner connection because we can, like I said earlier, kind of just hop over the emotions and what's going on inside. So that inner connection with ourselves, not just with our emotions, but with our deepest sense of self, right? This is in the Yoga Sutras. If we look at the first few, kind of the point of yoga, if I'm getting it, is to connect with your soul and who you are inside. So focus on that connection and the connections with each other. And those can happen online. I know a lot of us are getting Zoom headaches, me too. So we have to moderate that, but connecting where you can, in the park, on social media, in an online chat room, whatever that is. And another component, and this pertains to trauma-informed yoga in terms of faith in your process, like to come back to Shraddha or faith, right? There's a lot of unknown right now. I think we all agree on that. Can we have some faith in our own selves, in our own process? You know, there's a lot of graphics that I like to share. Like, healing is not linear. It's like a vine, right? It's growing in all these different directions. But can we have faith that that vine is finding its way towards the light, that there is something it's moving in the direction of? All right, so one more thing, two more things. Help specific people, okay? So this is Tara. She's one of my mentees. I'm very grateful and honored to know her and support her. I love helping Tara. Who do you love helping? Parents are having a hard time right now, right? They're teaching and managing their kids' schedules online. Medical professionals have been working hard, many hours for many days and months. First responders, same thing. Here in California, there's still folks out there fighting and trying to contain wildfires that aren't that far from where I am right now. There are families supporting these medical professionals and first responders, and they've had to bear the brunt of someone being gone for huge chunks of time. There are people who are grieving someone who's passed, who had COVID or passed from other causes during this time and weren't able to have in-person ceremony or closure. There are people maybe like you just seeking, what do I do next, right? Meaning or purpose. And there are also people who are feeling overwhelmed and isolated. And so as you look at this list, like, what resonates with you? Who do you feel like, oh, I really would love to help them, or I know I have something that could help them? When you help specific people, right? Yoga studios are a little more general, tend to be more fitness oriented these days. But when it's just you and you're putting an offering out online or to your community, think about the specific people that you want to connect with, right? And that you can serve based on what they're going through right now. So that also might be specific populations coping with trauma. There's been a rise in domestic violence and interpersonal violence in families. There's been a lot more abuse, even kids, right? Since the pandemic started and people have just been at home. So who is it that maybe you want to reach out to, or you want to speak to their needs? And you could connect with them over the internet or through kind of community centers if you have that kind of context and safety to do it outside or find a safe space. Okay, my last recommendation is to learn new skills. Something that's good for all of us. To take this as an opportunity to learn and grow, and so many yoga teachers have just leaned on studios to take care of business, right? Like, okay, you're gonna have people's memberships, you're gonna check them in and out, you're gonna, pay my taxes, you're gonna take care of all this. If you have any kind of inclination to go out on your own, obviously this is as good a time as any. Learn those business skills and think about what's that next one thing, right? Business skills can feel like a lot. What's that next thing? Maybe you just want to start an email list, or you want to learn how to do your own taxes if you're self-employed. So learning those simple business skills will help you move forward. Some of you already have them from other, prior corporate jobs and things like that. Ask yourself what you want to offer, right? Because things that are meaningful to you are going to build a better connection with the people in front of you. What speaks to your soul? What brings you joy? What feels uplifting when you think about it? What do you want to do? How can you connect directly with your students, right? So a lot of the examples I've given already, doing something outside, doing something different even than a Zoom class. You might be continuing those, but there might be something else. And getting really specific about how you can meet folks' needs at this time. Think about how your people are feeling, right? What do they need right now? So after you say, what do I need right now? What do they need right now? And you might just want to create something entirely new and different. So we're in this kind of box at times of used to be 90-minute, then 75-minute, and then hour-long, 45-minute yoga classes. Maybe there's something totally different you want to offer. So that's one of those kind of creative journaling prompts too, like what could I do that's different? And that might come out of conversations with people in similar spaces as you. So I encourage you to, as much as it feels like we have to do everything alone right now, partner up, right? Like talk to other people, dive into something that might actually make you feel a little more connected and might promote some more of that creativity. So we're at 1 o'clock, but we're going to wrap up here. I'm just going to reflect. I've got a little jewel for you and then give you guys some books. Okay, so this is our review. 3 ways to keep your teaching alive, teach to healing stress and trauma, help specific people, and learn some new skills and bring them into what you're doing, right? And some of this is a little bit of the feeling it forward. I write about this a lot, and I graduated undergrad. I had no idea what the F I was gonna do. People be like, what are you gonna do with your life? And I was like, I don't know, I'm working in a group home right now. I love it. You gotta kind of feel it forward, right? So it's okay if you don't have the like, oh, here's my vision and plan, and here are all the steps to get there. Just follow that curiosity and whatever feels like it's feeding you and whatever feels like it's meaningful moving forward. Now I picked this picture, you might have noticed on all the slides, I try to have a photo. I'm visual, a lot of you are visual folks too. And it reminded me of something that I have in a photo album I created when I was 22 years old. So I'm gonna share it with you now. And I'll tell you the story behind it. This was actually something that my brother Matt, some of you know, passed away in 2002, had in his wallet. He was carrying it around, right, for probably the last few years of his life. And that picture, just go back to show it, reminded me of it. And I want to share it with you guys. And this is the actual one he carried in his wallet. So it's very meaningful to me. It's in my photo album at home. It says, sometimes even the flower is so angry at God because the rain is so cold and uncomfortable. It too forgets to be grateful for the gift of growth the very same rain brings to it. And I think that just speaks to how when we're really uncomfortable, we kind of forget that we're growing and forget that forget about those opportunities that might be happening, and it might be an AFGO, another fucking growth opportunity. And I totally get it. You don't have to be all happy, joy about it. But this is something really meaningful to me, and I wanted to share it with you. All right, so a few cool things coming up. I'm going to send the recording out if you missed any part of this. Next Monday night, I'm going to be with Noreen Nikolic from Manila in the Philippines, talking about trauma-informed Ashtanga. So it's going to be a free webinar in the evening, Monday, August 31st at 6 p.m. Pacific, because that's morning the next day in the Philippines. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you haven't already. And then we have an info session for the Yoga for Trauma 8-week online training program. That's going to be September 2nd, but the program starts September 7th. So if you've been interested in that, you can learn about it at howwecanheal.com/Y4T, and the applications are there as well. I know some of you have been through it already. All right, it's time. So you've got a little Q&A box at the top. I'm just going to go for the first person for each book. So get your Q&A box ready. All right, and I'm going to give a print copy of Embodied Healing, my first book, away to the first person to put their name into the chat. So I'm going to cover, it's going to come to you in Silka Wittig. All right, so Silka, you can type in your address. I'm really going to walk to the post office after this with my N95 mask on, and I'm going to spray it with this alcohol lavender, and I'm going to ship it to you in this really fun package. So Silka, I hope I'm saying your name right. Put your name and address, or I got your full name, put your whole address into the chat, or you can email at lisa@howwecanheal.com, and I'm going to send it to you like ASAP. Okay, next one up is how you can heal. All right, this is a PDF copy because it never went to, I didn't print it, right? It's just an ebook. And we have, Lauren Maldonado. Lauren, so same thing, put your email address into the questions. I won't share it with everyone, I can just see it. And I will email you a copy of how you can heal. All right, and then we have, let's see, oh, you already can see it. Yoga for trauma recovery. So I'm going to go Leslie Ann Ellenberg. All right, you get a copy of Yoga for Trauma Recovery. If I can fit it into this lovely little pink thing, it will be in the flashy pink. I will spray it down with alcohol and I will ship it to your house. All right, now if those of you who didn't get the free book, if you want to put your email into the Q&A, I will send you a little special something as well. So I'm going to have to just download the Q&A after so I can see all of that because I can see you guys are sending stuff through. So make sure I get your address and your email, and I think we're good. Okay, everybody, I want to thank you so much for sticking around. It's been so nice just to be here with you, and I actually had a really good time putting this all together. You know, I wouldn't leave you without encouraging you to care for each other, right? This is me and Iris at the front door a couple months ago during an online conference. She was looking across the street, probably at a deer or a bird. But I snuggle her all the time because I just need a lot of love and care. So keep caring for each other, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next few free offerings, and looking forward to sending you guys these books. I'm going to sign them as well. Don't let me forget. You got 10 out. I'm going to sign them as well, and I'll ship off some love to all of you. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys. Oh, we can't forget the logo, Yoga for Trauma Recovery, little person with the leaves growing out of their arms. Bye, everybody. Have a beautiful day.